welcome to the Maine Planning Basics webinar. These monthly webinars are intended for those who are new to the profession and those who are new to planning in Maine. Today we'll be talking about best practices for comprehensive planning, and AICP credits for this webinar are pending, and we'll let you know when the code is available. You may be able to find it on the APA website. And I'd like to remind people that we do post the presentations and a recording of these webinars on our website, and I'll post a link in the chat. You can also sign up for email updates on our webpage in the Get MPAP Grants, Trainings, and News box on our website. So today we are joined by Kamm from the Northern Maine Development Commission and Ashley Gamache with the Municipal Planning Assistance Program. Jay has been a land use and transportation planner at Northern Maine Development Commission since 1993. He assists communities with the development of comprehensive plans, land use and zoning ordinances, and transportation plans. Ashley has been a planner at the Maine Municipal Planning Assistance Program for 11 months. While she is from away and new to the planning world, she brings a background in geospatial information systems expertise to designing and conducting research and analysis. So now I'll turn it over to Jay to present.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to try to share screens. Hope this works. I want to thank, can you see that comprehensive planning and lessons learned?
Yes, you're in edit mode, Jay, but otherwise it shows up fine.
Okay. Hello, machine. There. Thank you, Joan and Ashley and ABAT for asking me to be here today. I guess I have to start the whole presentation by saying I have watched a lot of the new planner webinars, and it's really quite heartening to see the number of new planners that are in the state. As someone who's been here for 30 years, Joan and I know that we've kind of had gone through a planner drought for a while, and it's really great to see a lot of very, very talented people, coming to Maine and working. So Joan and Ashley asked me really to talk about comprehensive planning and some of the lessons learned, and I have to really caveat that by saying that all of my experience has been in the Northern Maine service area. So I have not worked in Southern Maine, Central Maine, or even other states. And, to start out is, our region probably, and most likely, very different than a lot of the other regions in the state for a variety of reasons. So the lessons that we learned, may be different than what you need to do and work when you're working with your communities. And I thought I would start by just briefly talking about our service area and what it looks like. So as I mentioned, for planning purposes only, we provide planning services to all communities in Aroostook County, plus Patton in Northern Penobscot County and Danforth in Northern Washington County. Our entire economic development district also includes Washington County, but we don't typically do much planning in that area. So we have 2 cities. We have 3 larger communities, and a vast majority of our towns are small, and they're rural. We don't have any municipality in our region that has a population greater than 10,000. And if I were being truly honest, I think that, most are well under 1,000 people. So it's small, it's spread, it's relatively large, the size of Connecticut and Rhode Island combined. So I think our population density is right around 10 people per square mile. At the same time, uh, there was one municipal planner in the region, and he has since moved on to southern Maine. So we don't have any other municipal planner. Kristen and I are the only two uh, true planners in the region. So it's we're lacking certainly from a planning capacity uh, in the county. Caveat that by saying that Caribou, I think, is starting to look for an assistant city manager and planner, and hopefully they'll be able to get someone on board. A lot of great things going on in Caribou. Um, at the same time, and again, I can't speak for other areas of the state, with the exception of really our three larger communities and two cities, most don't have any form of land use regulation, with the exception of shoreline zoning. Land use, and I'll get into that later in my presentation. Land use and zoning is kind of the redheaded stepchild of the region. A lot of municipalities just do not want to have any kind of land use regulation, and the residents of that community really are feeling that way. And to me, I think the saddest part of our service area is that for decades we have suffered from outmigration, and it's really, in my mind, sad. We've lost a lot of talented people. We've lost a lot of young people. We've lost just a huge number of people over the course 1970s on. Uh, I think fortunately, since the COVID pandemic, it's changing. We're starting to see growth in a number of our communities. We're starting to see a little bit of a mindset change. A lot of those people that are moving here, especially some of the younger ones, are now serving on town boards. They're running for select boards. They're running for council, bringing in a new perspective. I think that's a positive change, and I hope it continues. So what does comprehensive planning look like in our region? And really, growth management was tough when the region was in decline, and it was awful hard to sell to communities. You need to be planning for growth when the last person leaving the town is shutting off the lights. So really, I think when communities were planning, and to some extent that's even true today, they were trying to stem population loss. They were planning for the needs of an aging population. They were looking at natural resource management issues and community development. And I think the bad part of what went on with comprehensive planning in our region, it was kind of driven by a single issue. Oh, we need to get points for a community development block grant, or we need to, apply to USDA or Department of Conservation for trails or recreation or those kind of things. There wasn't a lot of thought that went into land use and land use regulations. Fortunately, that is changing. So everything was kind of an afterthought. These are two of our, I don't want to say more recent plans, but you can see that, Patton has a 2017 comp plan. They have actually really spent a lot of time looking at that. One of our smaller communities, our largest community, City of Presque Isle, just had a plan adopted in 2021. Very different issues in those communities, and it's something that, as planners, we need to be looking at. I guess throughout this whole presentation, my comment will be know your audience and know who you're dealing with within the community if you're doing the plan. So this is really what it looks like on the ground. We have huge number of blighted properties. That's probably not the best example, but what we're seeing is with the aging population, as couples, for lack of a better term, get up into their late 60s, early 70s on a fixed income, having a very hard time maintaining their homes, properties become blighted. How do we deal with that? How does the municipality, work with, one, the property, and two, with the age group to figure out where those, individuals or couples can go? The other thing, and we're seeing it right across the board in our region, is public facilities and services. Towns that have municipal police departments are struggling to maintain them. Caribou is no exception. from a workforce standpoint, from a funding standpoint, from another number of other things. The natural resource slide on the lower left probably is a misnomer, and I I would be willing to bet that a large number of our municipalities really would not be looking at perch culverts from a natural resource management standpoint. I think they're going to be looking at those from a transportation standpoint. If those two culverts wash out and the residents living on the other side have a 30-mile detour, or emergency services have a 30-mile detour to get there, what do we do? So it's not that they're not concerned with fish passage, but again, it's probably knowing your audience that, yeah, we're going to go after DOT stream crossing funds, but the brook trout are doing well here. We don't necessarily need to be worried about them as much. And I guess I would say the same about the lower right slide was, we are struggling with transportation and certainly public transportation. How do we get workforce to and from jobs? We tend to have what I would call economic hubs rather than kind of downtown service centers. A lot of our mills and plants are located out in rural communities. People are living in other rural communities. So it's very difficult, very expensive to provide public transportation for workforce. Hopefully that's changing, and I think it is for the better. The same with how do we get the elderly and low to moderate income to their daily needs, to their medical appointments, and those kind of things. So we always ask communities, why do you live here? And, there's a number of reasons. Maybe the open space, it may be employment, maybe the festivals, recreation, our nice downtowns and those kind of things. And that's where I think one of the stumbling blocks of our comprehensive planning always has been. The towns are considering that the vision. Well, I live here because I can see the northern lights. Well, that may be a precursor to the vision, but it's not necessarily the vision for the community. Dark skies are great and those kind of things. How do we maintain those? How do we have growth at the same time in that? So there's this huge misnomer and misconception on the part of a lot of municipalities here of what the visioning process is. And I'm actually going to spend a little bit of time in my presentation on visioning because I tend to think, in my very humble opinion, that it is by far the most overlooked part of the comprehensive planning process. And what we find if we're asked to write a plan or to go to provide technical assistance to a community is that the town wants to jump in and start writing. Well, I look at that as they're being reactive rather than proactive. Mainly they want to write because there's an issue. We're being inundated with solar. We're being, we're losing maybe an industry. We don't know how to pave our roads and those kind of things. That's not the vision. That's part of the problem. That's an issue that we can work on. Kristen helped me with the next bullet and she's so right, is that, true visioning is the cornerstone of a successful comprehensive plan. Right? Without a vision, where are we going? We don't know where we're going. And, I hate to repeat myself, we're being reactive more than proactive in actually planning. We've worked with a number of municipalities to try to bring more people into the fold. And I think a big part of the visioning problem is that a municipality will advertise a workshop or a survey and get a very small response from the community. And it's probably true. We have short summers. Not everyone wants to sit at a visioning session on a beautiful 70-degree night in June when we've 2 months earlier we've had a foot of snow on the ground. You can get out and do some things. So we've worked with some communities, and I always remember the very first comprehensive plan I worked on, which was with the town of Bridgewater. And I don't know how to say this carefully, so I'm going to just come out and say it, probably get in my head. The planning board and the planning committee were made up of 7 elderly women. And every single meeting, they brought cookies, they made food, they made, they were knitting at the table, and it was really kind of a hometown feel. When we actually did a visioning session, they really stepped up. They did. They brought more cookies, they advertised that, hey, you can have food, you can have some things. Very good turnout. And it was because I firmly believe not necessarily what we were visioning was some really good desserts and some after dinner food. So it was certainly an opportunity. A number of communities that we work with in an effort to try to bring more people out are providing some kind of raffles, $100, 150 or more things for home heating fuel, for firewood, for gas, gas cards, those kind of things. I suspect that may be changing, certainly with climate resiliency. Maybe they're going to be looking at something else, helping with heat pumps or those kind of things. But again, it brings a diverse group of people, um, to the community to help them with the vision. Also have worked, and I will caveat what I'm about to say is I am the chair of the Aroostook Regional Transportation System, but more recently we have actually had arts provide free transportation to the meeting. You can get on an arts bus, you can come to the wellness center, you can participate um, in the process, and we'll bring you back home. So you don't have to worry about getting a ride. You can participate in those kind of things. And then finally, the last two kind of really go towards more the municipal end of things. We have, probably not unlike the rest of the state, but a huge number of festivals and activities in most of our communities. We have Thursdays on Sweden Street in Caribou. We have a concert in the park up in Madawaska. There's concerts in Presque Isle. And a lot of the planning committees really are starting to set up booths at those and actually going out and grabbing people as they walk by. Here's our vision. They'll have maps, they'll have photos, they'll have conceptual plans and those kind of things. And they're really getting a lot of feedback on that. And I think the good thing is we are a small enough region, and I mean that from a population standpoint, that what Caribou plans for, what Presque Isle plans for, truly does affect the surrounding communities. So we're also getting feedback from residents of those kind of outlying communities or bedroom communities, that we may not necessarily think of as being providing a vision for the community. And then finally, and it's time consuming, I'll admit it, going out and speaking either individually or to the groups, the senior citizens, the recreation groups, the businesses, and so forth. So towns, as I mentioned, struggle on how to do the visioning, and we always, default on workshops and meetings. And I hate to be so specific, but the city of Caribou actually is going through a comprehensive plan update, and they're doing actually visioning meetings for each one of the kind of subject areas. So they've had 2 on housing, they've had 2 on natural resources, transportation, and all of those. And it brings in a different group of people at times, but it also, there seems to be a core group that are very interested. And it works well, but we tend to be stagnant at times, I think, on how we advertise for those meetings. And, we miss people that don't necessarily attend or maybe shy at workshops of those kind of things. Digital engagement and public surveys. In the first video this year, I don't know who said it, but someone mentioned that the city was kind of adverse to digital engagement, and we're finding that the same thing in our region. Facebook and the others really seem to be, an outlet to voice an opinion, and it's somewhat anonymous, and that we need to be careful with that. We have concerned citizens groups and those kind of things. And I think it is a good way to if you can weed through kind of the chaff, you can get some pretty good feedback on visioning and those kind of things. But the planning board chair here in Caribou says, well, this isn't a public meeting. You're right, it's not. but it's one more way of gathering data, gathering information, um, for the community and getting some things. And again, we're small enough to know who the rabble rousers are, and even if they're anonymous, you can kind of tell by writing style and those kind of things. My next bullet's a little bit of a misnomer, and I kept it as a consultant, but that's not truly what I mean. Um, we are very fortunate that we have many residents that are certainly well versed in public participation, in designing workshops and analyzing data, and often are more than willing to work with planning committees, to hold workshops, to help design surveys, to help even analyze the data. And they may work at the hospital, they may work an agency or those kind of things. And the good part about that is they're often free or cheap. And so if a municipality is small and rural, doesn't have a lot of money, they can get pretty good public feedback for short money, and it works well. And 9 times out of 10, we are getting some great reports that we're using throughout the comprehensive plan um, process. The one thing that I see a lot of municipalities, if they even vision beforehand, is they're not developing the materials that help residents look at things, photographs, maps, concepts. I'm going to preface what I say is most of the visioning in most of our communities is on the fly. As they're writing the transportation section, they're visioning. But it's far nicer if you can develop some maps, maybe using the university, maybe using some of the engineering firms. Unfortunately, our office has limited capacity. Kristen is working towards becoming more, but actually having some maps that people can look at, point, put a sticker, a notepad, or those kind of things, and work on that. And as I mentioned, the fairs, the festivals, and the event, great source of being able to reach a lot of people relatively short period of time. Presque Isle went through a comprehensive planning process in 2020, 2021. They're going through the Village Partnership Program now. They have drop boxes set up throughout the community. They're getting great feedback on designs, on concepts, and that kind of thing. So someone goes in for their daily needs, buying groceries. Oh, here's a poster of what we're doing, and here's a poster of potential land use issues or transportation or housing, and they can actually comment and provide that. So there's opportunities, and again, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. So another area that we've had, I think, some success with is if the community actually is doing visioning, working with our potential partners and some of the agencies. And for the most part, they have been extremely receptive to helping a community, with the visioning process, because I think it really helps with their strategic planning and workforce development and work plan development. The only problem is you really do need to be careful if all of your CAP agencies and others that may be dealing only with low to moderate income families and individuals, then that kind of taints the issues and the data that you're getting. But we have worked with the Aroostook Regional Transportation System. That's even before I was chair, where they serve every community at least one day a week. So if Woodland is doing a comprehensive plan, they can put surveys on the bus, and they're getting data back, and the drivers are collecting that. At the end of the day, we can get some things. So you can do it 2-3 times, over the course of a month, and get some pretty nice feedback. The same with the Aroostook Area Agency on Aging, the CAP agency. One of the very underutilized groups that we've been using with some success is our soil and water conservation districts. They tend to have really good relationships with their large landowners, and for the most part, our agricultural communities. And they've been very helpful with getting farm surveys and gathering that kind of data. And our larger communities certainly have some economic development commissions or groups that work with the business community, work with developers and those kind of things. Typically our larger communities, but they're very helpful. And I'm sure there are others that I'm just completely forgetting, and that's not trying to be a slight to them. But these are the ones that we often work with. So Kristen and I, when we were putting this presentation together, really had I think a conversation on visioning, and really there's good and bad. And I'll start with the not so good, mainly because it was almost exactly an example of a community's vision down in the southern Aroostook area when we were writing the plan. Is that their vision was to reduce crime or lower crime rates. Well, it's a vision. I get it, and it's pretty narrow. It's not really inspirational. I think there's a lot of other things that they could have been thinking of. What's the root cause of the crime rate, and how do we get around those? I think they changed them, and it was a good thing. They've actually started to implement some things. They're working with, I guess it would be the Penobscot County Sheriff's Department. They're working with a number of the social service agencies that work for drug prevention and those kind of things, Maine State Police and others. So the vision was broadened, but at least they've started to achieve that in those kind of things. So, and I mean, you all know, you're planners. You've gone through what good and bad examples are, but try to be aspirational and inclusive at the same time, and that's hard for us, to be honest with you, in these our smaller communities, because they tend to typically go to the not so good example. Oh, we need to, extend sewer. Okay, again, well, that's more of a strategy than a vision. So really, I think this is where, and I strayed a little bit from what Joan and Ashley had asked me to do, but these I think are really the nuts and bolts of comprehensive planning in our region. And I honestly think a better term would be the stumbling blocks. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of, how do you analyze crash data, or, are you looking at retail sales and those kind of things. I'm thinking more along the lines of how truly are we helping our communities with either the technical assistance or the writing. So these are the four stumbling blocks, for truly a lack of a better term, that I see in our region, in the entire comprehensive planning process. And I'm really trying not to be derogatory, because that is not the case in any of what I'm about to talk to. You're dealing oftentimes with volunteers that are really trying and working their hardest to have a great product. So I do think that the planning committee is a stumbling block, at least in our region, because in all cases, and I wrote here in most, but really in all cases, it's the planning board. And the planning board meets once a month. They're more interested, or oftentimes more interested in, ordinance, maybe a application review or some kind of review, and maybe spend 15 or 20 minutes working on the comprehensive plan. So they're well-intentioned, but they don't often fully understand the true time commitment of a comprehensive plan. I can go sit there and talk to Mapleton's planning board and say, for the next year, you're probably going to be working on a comprehensive plan. Maybe we ought to be setting up separate work meetings or something like that, rather than having it part of your normal planning board meeting or regularly scheduled meetings. That's a hard sell at times. Again, I just mentioned it. 70 degrees on a July night. I'd rather be, fishing or doing something like that than looking at demographic section of a comprehensive plan. The other kind of stumbling block that we've seen, and Fortunately, I think with new people moving in, we're getting a different perspective, but they're often made up of very like-minded individuals. You know, I do not like large-scale farming. You have 4 planning board members that all feel the same. I don't like corridor management planning. I don't like how things are projecting, and they're all the same. So you're not getting a real strong, diverse group of individuals that are providing input, um, to the comprehensive plan. And I think the next box really kind of goes back to the unaware of the time frame and maybe even the like-minded. After 6, 7 months of working on a comprehensive plan, we often see members being burnt out and they become frustrated. They may not then be providing materials that are needed, providing the input, or even potentially writing the sections that they said they would write. Finding some success on the alternatives, really trying to work with the community, have a smaller core group of planning committee, probably made up of planning board members instead of all 7. Maybe we look at 3 or 4 that report back, but really work hard to try to bring other individuals or groups into the planning process. That may be part of the visioning where, oh, you're very interested in the downtown revitalization. Would you be willing to help either review or write that part of the plan? And it brings those groups, it brings one maybe a little bit different viewpoint, different, I lost track of what I was going to say and I apologize, but I think the selling point for a lot of people is that they're in and out in a relatively short period of time. Yes, I can help write the section. I can attend 1 or 2 meetings and I'm done. I can go enjoy the rest of my summer. I can go skiing. I can do whatever, not skiing in the summer, but you know what I'm saying. But it also, I think, draws attention to 1, the planning process, and 2, it may draw attention to, hey, yes, I'm writing for the local economy section, but I also want to get into the land use because my downtown revitalization works with that. Or it may work with, fiscal capacity, TIF districts, all of those other things. Again, just a broader viewpoint of things. I'll get off of the planning committee and talk about data analysis. My second to last slide really talks about data. So and I know Ashley's going to be talking about it. I'm not going to get into certainly the specifics, but what we are finding and across the board, no matter how sophisticated the planning committee truly is, we oftentimes get into a paralysis by analysis. What do we do with all of this information that's been provided, either in the data packet by the consultant who's looking at building permit activity or those kind of things, and it oftentimes shuts down the planning committee. And we can talk about a number of things, but what we really try to do is bring that data to a manageable level. And we truly understand that a trend isn't a plan, but it's oftentimes more understandable by the planning committee. Yeah, we have an aging population. We don't necessarily need to know what the 55-year-old age group is doing, but median age has gone from 35 to 45. What are the implications of that to our recreation program? Those kind of things. The one thing that we've always found, and I don't know if it's funny or not, but when towns are working on like the fiscal capacity section and talking, a $3,200,000 and 37-cent budget, most of the conversation revolves around 37 cents, just because you can understand that, and it's not brought down to the level, and it's not criticism or being condescending, but I understand 37 cents. $2 million is well out of my level of understanding. So it's, I'm not saying dumb it down, but think about trends. Think about not necessarily the specifics. I was at a planning committee meeting the other night, and they were looking at timber harvesting in the community. And the question was, what does 1990 timber harvesting in Patton really mean? Should we really be looking at the last 4 or 5 or 6 years and thinking about what's moving forward? So those are things that you can certainly work around. How to say this, because I know Judy and Joan oftentimes will get mad at me, but really in our region, without any doubt, any hesitation in my mind, the biggest stumbling block in the entire planning process is the creation of a land use plan um, for that community. And I will bet a month's salary that it will be the most contentious. If you're going to get any public feedback, this is where it will be. Um, and oftentimes there's a number of reasons for that. A lack of understanding, I think, on the part of the community as a whole. It is oftentimes thought of as a backdoor zoning ordinance. And no matter how many times you will tell the community or talk to a planning board or individuals that a comprehensive plan is not a zoning ordinance, it doesn't get through. And I guess I would look to you, if you have better thoughts of how we can do that, I'm all ears. We've had hard times and it's not getting any easier. Um, Growth and rural designations are very difficult for a community. And it's oftentimes a catch-22 is our prime farmland soils are also the best to develop. And, Farmer J has a farm on the outskirts of where the town can grow. I'm growing my 600 acres of potatoes. I want to stay that way. Okay, this is also the best area for development. What do we do? How do we marry that? I can't speak for any other region of the state, but we have a number of communities that have gone through the comprehensive planning process that have public water and sewer that were built or constructed to mitigate water quality issues. And DEP, EPA partially funded those, or for the most part, maybe funded those. And it was very clear. And we've had DEP staff in the past literally pound the desk saying, this is not to accommodate growth. We don't want to see additional growth, to this plant. And so conversely, then you're designating growth and rural. Well, we have public water and sewer. How do we lower our costs and add ratepayers to that? So it's been kind of a catch-22. I can use Frenchville and St. Agatha as an example. Frenchville is located on the St. John River. St. Agatha is on Long Lake. They've actually had to combine water and sewer. And now Frenchville is in the process of trying to figure out how they can expand. They're nearing capacity. So it's been problematic for that. So when you're looking at growth in rural, you want to be careful of certainly your public facilities. And kind of to, I guess, talk about the new residents that are moving into the area. A vast majority of what we're seeing are the new residents that are moving to more rural portions of the communities. Land typically is a little bit cheaper. The lots are large is what they're looking for. They want to be able to maybe raise some chickens or livestock or those kind of things. They don't necessarily want to be looking at a neighbor, not looking at a subdivision. And I was looking at or talking to Kristen before the meeting. I think in 30 years, we've had 4 or 5 subdivisions in organized communities, and we've had 0 in our unorganized townships. So we're not even seeing subdivision pressure. We're not seeing even on the horizon that we're a lot of subdivision going on. So it kind of points to what people moving to the area are looking for. And then the implication of roads, fire, and ambulance, and those kind of things. We're seeing it at Grand Isle, small villages or small residential developments popping up way out in rural areas. And then those residents are asking the town to, one, fix the roads. Fire ambulance can't get there in the winter time. We had a community where there was a woman who was pregnant went into labor and the ambulance couldn't get to her. They ended up bringing her out on a snowmobile. So, I mean, those are things that, municipalities really need to be looking at. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. I know you all know the principles of the land use plan, but we really need to spend a lot of time, working with the municipalities on what really uncoordinated development means to the municipality from a public facility standpoint, from a commerce, from housing, and those kind of things. We've had towns that have actually had growth areas, and I'm sorry, I should have fixed the typo on that last bullet, but the growth area was located in wetlands and floodplains. They never even looked at, those maps and thought about that. As what do you do? And it was truly problematic and certainly required a change in the designation. But there's like I said, you all know the principles of that. So I'm really almost done with the land use plan. As I mentioned, we have water communities that have public water and sewer that were not designed to accommodate growth. I don't know what the correct size is, or if there's a general correct size of what a growth in rural area should look like. We have seen 3/4 of a town designated as a growth area, and Portage Lake being one of them. And when they looked at their map, they looked at their land use map, they looked at development constraints, and the Route 11 corridor really had all of the development, had really much smaller lots. And east and west of that, large commercial landowners, typically one on either side. They're saying, we're not going to grow in there. So they had, 3/4 of the town was designated as a growth in rural. Others probably too small. And I'll show you an example here I think on the next slide. As I mentioned early on, a number of our communities have lost population, had declining population. So the easy way out for them is to ask for the growth in rural exemption. And that's truly where they're going. It doesn't necessarily take away the problems with growth in rural, but it's easier for them to just say, we're not going to designate growth in rural. So just some general thoughts. Again, if you're going to have strong public participation or want strong public participation, this is really the section that it's needed the most. Obviously, it's for the entire plan, but you need to be bringing people out. You need to be talking to the large landowners, the small landowners, the business owners in those groups. Where we see problems is, at a meeting, the conversation often goes to the haves versus the have-nots. How come I'm able to do this when my neighbor who's in a rural area cannot? Or conversely, how come my neighbor can put up, and I'm using this only as an example, a windmill in the rural area? It's impacting my, property in the growth area. One of the biggest problems that we see is across the board, rural designation are thought of as resource protection. And I use that in the true sense of the term, almost like a shoreline zoning resource protection district. And that really is not the case, should never be the case. And we strongly encourage and work with communities when we're reviewing comp plans is, think about what's in the rural area. If it's agriculture and all you're allowing is the growing of produce, you really should be thinking about smaller scale supports, small scale retail, agritourism, those kind of things. We saw that across the board. Probably a lot of our fault. We've written a lot of ordinances in the past, and we really do tend to think of protect agriculture, protect forestry, protect the view sheds and those kind of things. The world has changed, quite honestly. And we're actually seeing it. We went through a community guided planning and zoning effort, and it was also an issue in our unorganized, and that was changed, for that too. So we, as I kind of mentioned, even non-regulatory strategies cause problems. We're, we're seeing, how come my road out in the rural area is only chip sealed? I pay just the amount of taxes, there's someone in the village area who gets a paved road. We actually had towns that had police forces in the past that would kind of look at the urban area as where they would provide service, and that if an accident happened, maybe it was the Maine State Police that was providing. And it really did, it caused some problems. And, when you're paying taxes, you should be kind of across the board. And the land use plan really is where the rubber meets the road with a lot of the planning committees, and it's where they're going to get cold feet, I think. And Farmer Jay, who owns the 600 acres that's not being designated in growth, I'm not going to go to the planning committee and talk to them. I'm going to go to the select board. I'm going to go to the council and say, you know what? I'm one of the largest taxpayers in the community. I don't like what you're doing. Work with me here, or don't, or end it, and that kind of thing. And we also, and I always laugh, you go to a community of 300 that have spent a year working on a comprehensive plan, and 289 people show up, and they're opposed to the growth in rural because they're opposed to the comprehensive plan because of growth in rural designations. So just be aware that these could be stumbling blocks. So as I mentioned, I don't think there is a correct size for a growth in rural area. I think that we as planners really need to try to reduce or eliminate the fear that it is a zoning ordinance. And as much time as I spent on the implementation of a vision, it really is kind of the implementation of the town's vision. If you really think about it, it is the nuts and bolts of the comprehensive plan. So the map on the right is kind of a land use map that we've developed for well, it's not one of our towns, it's the multi-town comprehensive plan of Mapleton, Castle Hill, and Chapman. And Mapleton, for lack of a better term, would be the service area of those three communities. So kind of the upper right hand, Castle Hill to the west or to the left, and then Chapman below. Mapleton and Chapman really are bedroom communities to Presque Isle. Chapman tends to gravitate more towards Ashland, and it would be rural. So the circle in the middle is where their planning committee worked to designate the growth area. And it does contain some public sewer, has the school, a couple of restaurants and those kind of things, more compact residential development. What absolutely shocked me when we were doing this comprehensive plan was Castle Hill. I think if I were a new planner, not familiar, and was asked to write this plan, I would say Castle Hill is anti-land use regulation, anti-growth, not anti-growth, but anti-growth management, kind of the Wild West, if you want to think about it. Chapman probably being different and more aligned with Mapleton. So each of the three communities tried to write one ordinance for the communities, different standards based on the community. It really got convoluted and problematic. But Castle Hill really jumped in and said, we value our natural resources. We value where we're growing in the community, and actually have a much stronger ordinance and implementation of the growth area than Chapman does. And it's surprising because a lot of the high-end housing, let me just back up. Chapman and Mapleton really were kind of the pressure valves for Presque Isle, so that people were moving to those two communities because of education, having the same school district, a lot of the recreation departments, but much lower cost of living. Chapman was absolutely opposed to to the land use. And as you can see, chose not to participate or chose not to designate a growth or rural area. And they got it through the planning office. This is a slide that I was hesitant to add to this because I think it truly is a catch-22. One of the stumbling blocks in my mind, and it maybe is only in my mind, is the checklist. I think it's a great checklist, and towns really seem to like it. I think it provides some guidance and helps them address issues that they may not have thought of. And I do believe that it helps to ensure that the components of the plan are addressed for consistency. And that ultimately is the goal of a lot of the planning committees. I do think it oftentimes, stifles their creativity. Oh, we have this checklist, we're writing to the test. I heard it just this week at a planning board meeting. Yeah, we can write to the test. And they're literally taking that checklist and almost cutting and pasting underneath and putting their things in. And then they're saying we're done. Well, I don't know if they're done. I think there's a lot of other opportunities that maybe they're not thinking of. And maybe that's where, we as planners and that are providing TA really need to be thinking. Checklist is great. Use it, follow it, but don't let that be the only guiding principle of how you're doing the comprehensive plan. We always know it ultimately is the municipality's plan, and there's probably opportunities that we aren't thinking of in the checklist. So my final thoughts, and I promise I'm almost done. Just some other stumbling blocks that probably are not related really to growth management, but are more related to the comprehensive plan. We are having a number of municipalities that are working on their own in writing plans. And what we're finding is that they get into 75% completion and then really are either burnt out or stuck. And they're well-intentioned, they're working hard to try to implement it, not implement it, but write it, and then ask for assistance. And I'm going to say political capital with a little p, because there's ownership, there's 75% ownership in the plan, and it ends up being extremely costly in time and in money and in political capital. And I think the best example that we had was the city of Presque Isle started their comprehensive plan. I'm going to say it was around 2017. The planner at the time was working on it. He retired. The new planner worked on it, submitted it to the Department of Ag for review, and came back with a long checklist and asked our office if we could help clean up the plan. So very small budget, trying to address certainly the comments that were received back. Well, the planning committee thought that they were getting a whole new plan, and it was very problematic. And we really had to fight with them, saying, "Wait a minute, we didn't budget for writing a new plan. We're addressing the comments we received back." So just be careful that if you get multiple authors that maybe are strong-willed and that kind of thing, that they get some ownership in that. And not a bad thing, but just be aware. The other thing are regional plans. We have strived to, with our SEDS, with transportation plans, with housing plans and all, really to try to bring as many municipalities into the fold, to provide input, to provide projects. Difficult time. And I think it's nice to say, yeah, we can reference a regional plan, but if you only have half a dozen communities out of our 65 that have participated, does it truly represent what the municipality wants and needs? And those. So we're really working hard to try to get the communities to provide input into the emergency management, all of their SEDS, and all of the regional plans. I think that's the opportunity, for comprehensive planning. As I mentioned and showed the growth area of our multi-town plans, we have two in our region. Mapleton, Castle Hill, and Chapman, and then Smyrna Merrill down in southern Aroostook. They work well, especially when there's one government central to each of the communities. So in the case of both communities, the town office is located in one, town manager is manager in both, code enforcement in both, public works in both. It works well. As I kind of alluded to, when you get to the land use and maybe ordinance, it doesn't necessarily work as well, just because there are differing opinions and differing values in it. But that's okay too. You can work around that. This is one for us. Our comprehensive plans, if we were doing a full-blown comprehensive plan for something like the city of Caribou or the city of Presque Isle, we're probably in the $22,000 to $25,000 range. Smaller communities, very high teens to maybe low 20s. It's a stumbling block. You know, when a municipal budget's relatively small, that's really out of their range of doing something. And I know I will have a select person or a counselor say, I have the opportunity to fix a road or to do a plan. I know what my residents are going to tell me. So I think that the stumbling block is certainly funding for comprehensive planning. Again, not speaking for any other region of the state, aging population, oftentimes stuck in the past. You know, what worked 40 years ago is working fine today. We're not necessarily looking forward. Without fail, I can go to pretty much any central Aroostook community and I will hear that Loring Air Force Base closed in 1994. Yep, sure did. What's the opportunity? And you have to get past the closure and figure out what the opportunity. There may be infrastructure, pipelines, maybe things that our roads are built to a different standard. That to me is one of the great, and I don't want to ever say that COVID is great because it certainly was not, but of new, young, talented people moving to the area don't necessarily have a strong grasp of the history. They know that Loring closed, but they're not necessarily as concerned about it. I think it works better. Unrealistic timeframes and expectations. What's today? August 2nd? Yeah, we'd like a full plan by August 5th. And I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but Mapleton, Castle Hill, and Chapman are just today we signed a contract with them. They want a plan by December. That's a really short time to be doing a comprehensive plan, you know, for things. Even though it's an update, I don't know what updates truly mean anymore. I think fortunately times are changing, or that we have new town managers that are working. You know, never forget our past, but we do need to move forward, and I think that is starting to change. So this is my second to last slide, and I think we are very fortunate when it comes to comprehensive planning that we now have a wealth of information, data, and guidance at our fingertips. Again, having my conversation with Kristen this morning, and maybe Jim and Joan and others, remember 20, 30 years ago, we did not have half of the data that we can get now with a simple Google search or going to a state website or wherever. I mean, we had to either generate it, try to figure out where to go. We were hand drawing maps at times, and it was time consuming, and it was so it's a positive change. You know, certainly the old state planning office was probably easier to work with. I know that Maine Revenue Services and others are still providing data, but it's not the same. Always double check Headwater Economics. Town of Fort Fairfield recently asked for some demographics. We ran Headwater Economics for them. And for whatever reason, it comes across only as the CDP. We could not get specific town data. So you always want to make sure, just don't download something and fire it off to them. But really, from a data standpoint, we truly are at the good old days. And I promise this is my last slide. And Kristen laughs at me because I date myself with this one, but I don't know if all of you know who Yogi Bear is, but he was a great philosopher and wordsmith. And he once said, you've got to be careful if you don't know where you're going because you might not get there. And I think that that's, pretty apropos is that, the visioning, the land use and all of that is certainly, important to the comprehensive plan. So with that, that's my final slide and I thank you.
So Jay mentioned I was going to be talking about data, and I am. These are the good old days of data. I'm very happy that we have Google, and I have done a lot of updates to the way that we present planning data to folks here. So I'm going to highlight the changes we've made to our comprehensive planning data. Historically, these were obtained in a very cumbersome biannual process involving zip files. Normally, you would go to our website and download your town file, and you would get a zip file that looks something like this. Since I've started, I made the Maine Comprehensive Plan Data Portal and Mapping Services Story Map. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I will leave questions at the end. But this new process offers real-time access to essential planning data and simplifies navigation of chapters related to review criteria and utilizes data sets from various state and federal agencies. Users can explore interactive maps, informative narratives, and downloadable data on topics like historic preservation, demographics, and environmental features, among others. As you scroll through it, you'll see the Maine Resource Explorer is one of the first things you'll see. I have this in a bigger tab here. So as you navigate onto this app, you'll be able to see the aerial, natural constraint, infrastructure, and soil maps. There's also a custom app, but I wanted to go through the 4 main topics with you. I'll open a new page. So when you navigate in here, you'll see the state map. I apologize, my data connection is a little slow. But as you come in, you'll see the state map, and it'll have a list of towns over here. As I live in Strong, I'm going to pick on my town. So you would just type in your town, spell it correctly, and click on your town name. You'll see that this piece up here changes, so it'll say the town name at the top, and you'll see a little orange highlight around the center. If you go over here to print imagery, and you'll see it hasn't loaded quite yet. My data connection is a little slow over Zoom, so I did pull it up here as well. That one, this one. All right, a little slow on the data connection, but it will load. There it goes. So if you click here and print your aerial imagery, it'll bring you up to this nice page here, and you can change any of these settings. So for example, if you wanted to add your town name, you could do that here. And you just go in and press print, and it'll show up in the results here. Once it's loaded, it'll give you the result image here. And again, I did this already. So your aerial image, I have to do it again. So we'll wait for it to slow. But as you wait for it to load through, you can come into any of the other tabs, and it will already zoom to the town you selected. So as it loads, we'll go there. And essentially, you would do the same thing for each one, which is print each one, print, and it would show up in the results here. So as you continue through the story now, you'll see different topic areas for each item. For example, historic and archaeological resources. And you can see the data availability right here on the table. If it's online, it'll say online, and you can click this little link right here, and it'll open it up in a new tab for you. And then anything that's offline, it'll show offline. You can continue as you go through. There's different topic areas for each one, and it'll have the list of available resources there. So each topic area outlines the minimum data requirements. It also links the relevant Chapter 208 sections. While most data sets are accessible online, as I showed you, some are not, such as the archaeological sites. You have to contact our MPAP directly, either me or Tom. Due to sensitivity or preparation status, it may not be available to publish online. So in addition to the minimum data requirements, most topic areas contain additional resources and guidance. For example, the economy, population, and demographics section. If you scroll down to the additional resources and guidance, there are a bunch of tutorials here on the state economist website, census data, and mapping census data. So if you need additional resources, that is the spot to look. There's a lot of good info in there. And then beyond the data, the story map also provides a planning timeline, FAQs, statute and the rule, technical resources in the manual, and additional resources. You can find these all through the navigation bars at the top here, or you can scroll through past the topic areas. In addition to that, I also wanted to highlight our municipal, regional, and statewide plan app. Jay mentioned that regional plans could be beneficial if there were a lot of towns involved. So I've been building this out as the region send me plans. So it is a work in progress. As you go into the municipal plan tab, make this bigger so you can see it. For example, if you wanted to, we'll pick on strong again. So you'll see that it zooms straight to strong. Talk this. You can see the general information about strong. It's an inland town. The last comprehensive plan was 1992. It was adopted in 1993 and found consistent June 7th, 1993, which is valid through 2005. It's not an LAPC territory. And then regional plans that may be applicable to strong based on the ABCOG region. Those can all be seen here. And as you click on each one, you can go into it, and these are all linked documents, so you can't open them all and look through them. There are a lot in there. I believe there's about 130 right now, so feel free to look around. There's plenty to look at. And then if you need to deselect, just unselect there. That's my data. It's a little bit slow right now. So if you wanted to look at those plans by region, you go into the regional tab, select one of the regions, for example, ABCOG, and it will highlight that region. You can pull up the list of plans here, and you can view all the links here on the side, as well as plan names and the categories that are attached to them. Same thing for statewide plans. This is just a list of plans that are effective throughout the state. So by identifying relevant plans, communities can gain valuable insights, best practices, and inspiration for their own planning efforts. I'm hoping that this makes a significant step forward in supporting Maine communities in their planning endeavors by providing accessible, up-to-date data and resources to empower planners to make informed decisions and create thriving communities. That's it. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for me or Jay?
I have a general question for the group, maybe, if that would be okay. Kind
Yep.
of a discussion point. So
Yep.
I'm just curious, what the visioning for comp plans looks like in different parts of the state. Have you guys seen something similar to what we're seeing, where it's just like, I need more people, not like an actual thought out vision that could be backward engineered for a solid plan? What does that look like across the state and other communities?
I will speak for where I live in southern Maine. My town is doing a comp plan, and the town hired a consultant who did several public workshops, and they asked people, what do you think Raymond will look like in 20 years? What do you want it to look like? They did surveys asking people for their opinion, and then they incorporated that information and did a second workshop where they had a series of different future scenarios, different development scenarios for the town. And they asked people to comment on what they liked about different scenarios and which one they liked the best. And if there are things they wanted to borrow from other scenarios and apply to the preferred scenario. And I know Yarmouth, not to throw you under the bus, Julie, but if you'd like to speak about Yarmouth, I know Yarmouth just did a plan, and I think it's a very well done plan. I don't know if you'd like to speak about that.
Sure. Thanks, Abe. Sorry, and apologies, you've got frozen on in the background here. But yeah, I think I thought it was fascinating listening to Jay and just the similarities, even regionally, with the comprehensive plan. I do think people certainly take amount of local pride when it really reflects their community. So as much as Kristen, to your question about differences and similarities across the state, I think we did look at other local communities that were either undertaking plans just as we were starting off or were had recently completed. And I think that's the benefit of the checklist, right? But still tailoring it to the creativity that the volunteer committee brings, and that those unique elements of your own community, still making it very much distinctly about the home is something that I think, what was the question someone had about how do you track community and how many town residents read their comprehensive plan within the first plan's month? I'm only half kidding when I say do a trivia night and give prizes afterwards to see who's read it and what parts are, and you can tie it into raffles, which is what we did, and at the very get-go to see who had read the inventory chapters. We also did a scavenger hunt to try to encourage people to get interested in nerding out over that early data collection phase of the inventory chapters. So I think there's some fun things you can do to both highlight that local information that is part of the checklist, but also still engages people and motivates and builds local pride too. Did that answer your question, Abe?
Yeah, and I also wanted to comment on what Jay said about growth areas, because we have an intern, Gunnar Martin, who's been working with us over the summer, and we've been mapping or looking at the growth areas that have been identified. So far, we've been looking at southern Maine, and it seems there's a reluctance from many towns when you ask them to identify a growth area. They don't want it, because the term growth, they're picturing, well, we're going to have this growth area, and all of a sudden our town is going to become Route 1 Scarborough, Route 302 North Windham. That's not what they want. Even if their town has historic villages, they have village density, they the term growth just frightens them. Whereas if you used a different term, where do you want your village to be? Where's there room for expansion of existing development that's in character with existing villages? You may get a different response.
Can I jump in, Ashley?
Go ahead. I was going to say you have your hand raised.
Okay. So I just want to echo what Abe said, that using different terms is very helpful. And if you've got the skill set or can hire it, the idea of visualization tools, what does growth look like? Or what does the village look like? Or what should it look like? What do you want it to look like? I think those are all really good tools. And then the other thing, again, agreeing with Julie, making it fun. Voting with M&Ms in a jar, on different choices. And then there is guidance in the rule about the kinds of questions that you can ask. I found in the visioning meetings that I did was absolutely putting, the year 2050 or whatever it is out there. Go out 15, 25 years. Get people in that longer term mindset. In any sort of signage that you put up, put a baby on your sign, and you're imagining the future for this baby or this toddler, and really get people into that longer term mindset. And then the rule does have 4 or 5 questions that can guide the conversation, especially in rural Maine. I think they're very helpful. I found them so, is to ask people, where does the town of, let's say, Millbridge fit in the region with respect to transportation? What are the transportation needs you have because you're on Route 1 and people come to you or they drive through your town? And you can ask a similar kind of question about, where does your town fit in terms of the natural resources you have and the contribution you make to the region? And I find if you ask questions that are unique to the town, but also give them that larger context of the future and the region that they live within, you get really juicy answers from people. And I have found that super helpful.
So Lauren in the chat asked about strategies for implementing the comprehensive plan and monitoring the success of the plan. Do you have any comments about that, Jay?
Yeah, when we if we're working with a community on a comprehensive plan, we actually go through their entire plan, look at the strategies that they've developed, and kind of do a check. Yeah, this one. We actually, I'm happy to say that we run in about the 80% range of implementation, which would like to think maybe is a sign of a good plan. But I'm not sure I'm answering the rest of the question. You said it was in the chat.
So I've reviewed.
Yeah, all right.
Oh, well,
Nope.
I was going to say, our comprehensive plan criteria rule requires that towns include evaluation measures in their plan and that they look at those when they do their next plan update. I haven't always seen that evaluation done, but some towns have looked at it, and for example, they've mapped out where the new development has been relative to their growth areas.
So maybe I'm misreading the question too, but the strategy to implement the plan, at least the ones that we have seen are successful, is the department heads within the municipality have played a strong role in the development of the strategy. new planning board members or new planning committee members are given a copy of the plan. There's actually at times a discussion. um, Here's here's what we think for recreation, or here's what we think for our zoning ordinance and those kind of things. It's really kind of keeping the plan at the forefront of the conversation. I think is probably the best strategy. And I tell every community that I work with, the worst plan in the world is the one that looks like it's brand new. If it isn't tattered, torn, highlighted, post-its and that kind of things, then something was wrong with the plan. If it's, and the other thing is, I think from an implementation standpoint, is to be right up front with the community from the very beginning. If they are doing a comprehensive plan because they want solar moratorium, they're probably far better off doing a solar moratorium ordinance rather than a full-blown comprehensive plan. And really to get them thinking about getting away from that single issue of this is why we're doing, or if they're going after a community development block grant, you might be better off doing something else rather than the full-blown plan. I don't know if that answers the question either, but.
And to add a little bit to what Jay was saying, as far as being able to monitor the success of the plan, I think there are some creative ways that towns can do that visually within the town hall or the town office by listing each one of the sections and showing goals, kind of like the telethon, where everybody calls in and every time you get another $10, up goes the red thermometer. And it's visually appealing to the citizens who can see that when they go in and pay their taxes and feel comfortable with the comprehensive plan and maybe pick it up and read through it themselves, and become excited for it. So hopefully that's what she was asking as well. I want to make sure that I was addressing that too.
So does anyone else have any questions? Well, I don't see any other questions, so maybe it's a good time to wrap up this session. We plan on having a webinar next month, September 6th. The topic is still to be determined. We'll keep you updated about that. So thanks for joining us today and have a good rest of your day, everyone.